from the mindset of a fighter pilot. It's a great pleasure to have all of you partners in learning with us this afternoon. The subject is of immense interest because it's so rare that we can actually get to see and hear a real fighter pilot in the flesh and blood. Fighter pilots are highly romanticized characters, Top Gun and so on and so forth, but it's very, very rare to actually see and interact with a fighter pilot. And believe you me, it's going to be exciting. Let's see. Yes.
Sorry, I need to just, okay.
Yeah.
So just hung up. Okay, you can continue, Madhav. I'll change it whenever.
Sure. We are going to look at the territory that we are going to fly over today, and let's see how we navigate through the intricacies of the various interesting waypoints. First of all, we'll take a look at what is military leadership lessons, and then understand the subject today. And then we'll meet Group Captain Charlie Weir, who's on your screen right now, but we'll get to know him much better. And then we'll hand over to him for his opening remarks. And that's when Group Captain Charlie Weir will start flying this whole conversation. We'll look at the background of air power, fighters, and so on and so forth briefly. And then we'll ascend into segment 1, a very rapid ascent, I might add, where we'll take a look at molding and training the mind. And then we'll level out on segment 2, which is the end product of molding and training the mind. What is the end product? After which we'll have a brief question and answer covering segments 1 and 2. If any of you have questions or observations, we can deal with that. And then we'll come over to segment 3, which is the applications of all these concepts and ideas we talked about in segment 1 and 2, applications to top level management, following which we will do an overall Q&A, and then we'll run a poll with 4 questions where you just have to answer yes or no. And then it'll then be back to Group Captain Charlie Weir for his closing remarks, and then I will summarize and express my thanks to everybody. So let's look at what is military leadership lessons. Leadership is the difference between winning and losing a war. Many of the concepts and practices deployed by military leaders are directly applicable in other spheres of human activity. Indeed, much of management knowledge has evolved from military applications, and military leaders have priceless lessons to offer to their civilian counterparts. And this series constructs a bridge of learning from battlefields to enterprises. Military leaders are fantastic teachers. In this series, 3-star officers and other exceptional personnel of the Indian Armed Forces share their experience, expertise, and wisdom on the art, science, and practice of leadership in a series of in-depth explorations with me, VK Madhav Mohan. Fighter pilots are among the creme de la creme of warriors. That's because they are an awesome combination of aggression, killer instinct, skill, and leadership. How do they evolve with almost superhuman capabilities? And that's going to be the subject today. And we're going to explore the intricacies of learning from the mindset of a fighter pilot with Group Captain C J Weir. I'm sure all of you are anxious to meet Group Captain C J Weir. Currently, he's the director of a registered company named Seahawk Aviation Consultancy Private Limited. He's the president, director, and chief flying instructor of a flying training institute. He established a new flying training institute and put in place a whole viable business plan and made the entire institute turn around in a record time of just 1 year. He came up with innovative ideas and concepts which made a big difference to the business prospects of this flying institute. And he also assisted in the formulation of a state's aviation policy, where the state will create a conducive environment for the promotion of regional airlines by private industry. He has impressive Indian Air Force qualifications. He's been a fighter combat leader. He's a member of the Tactical Air Combat Development Establishment staff. He's a qualified flying instructor and has logged 4,500 hours of flying experience in the Indian Air Force and a total of 7,000 odd hours of flying experience. He's had experience of command air defense. In fact, he was the CAD officer, Southwestern Air Command, and was responsible for organizing and coordinating the air defense activity in Southwestern Air Command area, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Maharashtra during peace and war. This entailed identifying our vulnerable assets, the threat from different areas, and creation of a multi-tiered air defense umbrella by allocation of specific resources. And these resources included radars, surface-to-air missiles, and interceptor airplanes. Group Captain Weir was Commander No. 2 Tactical Air Center. He was responsible for planning and implementing air operations in coordination with Southern Command Army in the Rajasthan and Gujarat sector. He was a station commander, Air Force Station Lucknow, where he had independent command of an airbase comprising 2,000 personnel and assets worth rupees 1,500 crores. One of the functions was to induct a rupees 800 crore weapon system and operationalize it in the Indian Air Force. A number of visits abroad as team leader for negotiations with foreign vendors were undertaken by him. And the station also had one fighter squadron. He was commanding officer of a fighter squadron consisting of 350 airmen, 25 officers, and 18 aeroplanes. And the assets were worth a whopping rupees 500 crores. He was also the chief flying instructor, Indian Air Force, and was responsible for coordinating training flying for 100 trainee pilots with 25 airplanes and 20 flying instructors. And in the period of 2 years, 18,000 hours of flying were done accident-free. His strengths are organizing skills, team building, leadership, and achievement orientation. Group Captain Charlie Weir comes from a long line of very distinguished servicemen. He is the son of the late Air Commodore R.A. Weir, Veer Chakra, Vayu Sena Medal. On a personal note, Group Captain Charlie Weir is a very dear friend of mine. And so he'll give me the liberty of addressing him as Charlie.
Yes, Madhav, yes.
Charlie is an uncommon, extraordinary human being. A fighter pilot with 4,500 hours of experience on the MiG-21s and an overall flying experience of more than 7,000 hours. And he's still alive to tell us about it. That tells you the kind of skills and competence that this extraordinary fighter pilot has built up in the course of his career. Because in this line of work and life, one mistake is fatal. And here he is, after 4,500 hours in the cockpit of a MiG-21. That tells you about his flying skill. I've observed him while flying very carefully. And actually, Charlie doesn't fly an aircraft. I don't think he flies an aircraft. Rather, the aircraft is a manifestation of his consciousness and his thoughts. That is how integrated he is with the machine. You cannot make out the separation between Charlie and the aircraft once Charlie is in the air. He's a different person. And the aircraft is just an extension of his mind and body. That's it. Let me tell you that we are in the presence of a true master. I know, because I've had the privilege of being his flying student. Over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Madhav. Wow, that warms the heart, the sight and sound of the aeroplane. Thank you very much, Madhav. You've been rather generous with your praise and comments, and I must thank you very much for that. Just a small correction. I have a total of 4,500 hours in the Air Force, out of which 2,500 hours are in the MiG-21. The hours on fighter aeroplanes are not easy to come by, and we normally count sorties. And just in our little family, I am number 3 in the hierarchy of the number of hours flown in the Air Force. I would like to place 2 things on record, Madhav. Firstly, I am a very average product of the system of the Indian Air Force. And I say that with all honesty. I also believe and have the utmost respect for my brothers in arms in the Indian Army and in the Indian Navy, because it is only this synergy that will get us victory in war. I'd like to highlight some personal details, Madhav, with your permission. Certain organizations, and more importantly, certain individuals who have played a very key role in making me think correctly as a fighter pilot. And since this is all about molding the mind of a fighter pilot, and I want to keep emphasizing this is important. My father was also a fighter pilot. He commanded 3 fighter squadrons. In the 1971 war, as a group captain, he volunteered and was flying a single-engine piston aircraft, the Harvard, in the battlefield airstrike role in Rajouri and Punch. And for his gallantry, he was awarded the Veer Chakra. My sister is married to Air Commodore Surinder Singh Tyagi, a very distinguished fighter pilot of the Indian Air Force, who holds the record of flying hours on the MiG-21 in the world.
Wow.
And I think, these 2 individuals really played a key role in making me join the Air Force and keeping me on the straight and narrow most of the time, being the naughty boy that I was. I was commissioned into the Air Force in 1976. I mostly flew the MiG-21. I specialized in electronic warfare. I did my QFI's course, then I did my fighter combat leaders course, and was taken on staff in TACD. TACD, being the Tactics and Air Combat Development Establishment, is a prestigious fighter pilot's mecca, so to say. I did in my staff course and commanded 8th Squadron. The interesting part where, this topic comes into context is after I left the Air Force. I did my commercial pilot's license, became a chief flying instructor, and I acquired a flight school. I actually didn't know what I was getting myself into. But when I acquired the flight school, it was in a bit of a mess. Got things together, and it's then that I realized how these processes in the Air Force that I imbibed and learned could be applied to any dynamic organization that we have. Now, this is the essence of what we are going to be discussing today. So it's not really the Air Force, it's not really the fighter pilot, it's how we can contribute by imbibing these lessons so that other people, other companies, other areas can become better and better and better. So that is the real essence of what we are going to be discussing, today. As you had, advised me, Madhav, to get this whole discussion into a bit of focus, we'll just cover a few important things as a background before we kick off. The first is the role of air power. Now, air power itself is all the aircraft, manpower, assets, weapons, systems that a country possesses. This comprises air power. And the role of air power is to get a degree of dominance over the enemy in the air. Now, there are 3 stipulated degrees of dominance. One is the lowest one being the favorable air situation, the next one being air superiority, and finally air supremacy. So this is what you're trying to do in a war and preparing for this. In peace, air power assets train to achieve wartime goals and also assist authorities in times of calamity. What is a fighter aircraft? A fighter aircraft is a fixed wing aircraft which has weapons which can destroy targets on the air and on the ground. It's generally manned by a one-man crew. You can also have some fighter aeroplanes with a 2-man crew where a second person assists the pilot in certain areas. The role of the fighter aircraft is that since this is the weapon platform, it becomes your tool to achieve the air dominance. And that's why it becomes central to the theme of achieving the air dominance. Now, this is important. And one such fighter aircraft, which you have selected for me to just speak a little on, is the Warhorse, the MiG-21. Inducted into the Indian Air Force in 1963, a single engine Mark II plus aeroplane at that time, designed in the late 50s. It can perform both roles, that is the air combat role and the ground attack role. It can carry missiles, guns, bombs, rockets, weapons. Like I said, Mark II plus speeds at that time, up to an altitude of 16 to 17 kilometers.
Mark II being twice the speed of sound.
Twice the speed of sound. That's right, Madhav. Thank you. Thank you for chipping in there. Now, I have a small model over here. Now, this is a Delta. It's a Delta platform aeroplane, and because of this, it had certain idiosyncrasies. We had to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the aeroplane and get used to it. And this applies to any aeroplane. You have to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of that aeroplane are. But if I have to single out one single aeroplane that has really played a major role in the Indian air power story, it would be the MiG-21 for its sheer longevity. When I commanded my squadron, The aeroplanes were already 30 years old. My father flew some of the same aeroplanes that I flew in its squadron at that time. So that's how vast this span of employment of this particular aeroplane has been legendary. So let me just get to the topic itself, and I would like to tell you, Madhav, that this session is devoted to the lessons that the non-military world can learn from the mindset of the fighter pilot. Therefore, at every juncture of our little tete-a-tete, I would keep bringing into focus this issue. So what we are wanting to get at the end of this discussion is what are the lessons that we should learn from how this mindset has been developed. And that's important. It is indeed very creditable that the planners of the Indian Air Force understood the complex requirements that would need to be addressed while setting the aims and objectives for wartime scenarios. See, these guys were sitting 60, 70 years ago, and they were trying to bring out a system that could be put in place. And eventually, this is the raison d'etre of the Air Force, is victory in war. What high degree of air dominance you can achieve. Now, as we go along in this discussion, I will bring out the methodology purely with the aim of highlighting these issues, because they're very important. And from this will emerge the lessons that could be learned by the corporate, bureaucratic, and political organizations, what I call the non-military world. So I would say that we should be positive in our thinking and try and improve the systems that we have by giving positive and good suggestions which can be implemented. The medium of the air, this medium is only been exploited in the last 120 odd years. But by golly, you look at the speed, started off with say 40 kilometers, now you're at 2000 kilometers. Look at the proliferation of technology, all rolled up into one little weapon platform, the aeroplane. So it has seen a very large change. And this rate of change is what one needs to cater to. You have to hone and temper the minds to the attributes of this medium. And that's what has been done. Stood the test of time. So the system that was created to ensure national aims and objectives are met, and this framework thus created has to be flexible enough to absorb both these things. The rapidly changing technology. We've gone through 4 generations of aeroplanes following the same system. And that's why our pilots can very easily just fly out of France and start flying the other airplanes, because they've been systematically trained. And this is the big takeaway. So there is a large team of air warriors. And I use this term, air warriors is all encompassing. That is, all personnel in the Indian Air Force are called air warriors. Everyone is an air warrior. So you have a large team of air warriors and equipment which is put in place, optimally used. And a part of this team, the core, is the fighter pilot. And when I show you a bit more of this, you'll realize the many things that need to be done. And I'll request you, Madhav, to keep jumping in whenever you feel like it's an open discussion. An important component of this team is the squadron concept. Now, the squadron concept, squadron is a unit, and it's tasked specifically to achieve certain aims and objectives in war. That's what the squadron does. Aims and objectives. So it's been given certain tasks, aims and objectives in war. And everything revolves around this wartime task. The aircraft, the weapons, the pilots and the training, the young pilots join a squadron and is then trained first to become fully operational, then as a leader, and finally as a commander. And to fit into this team, the most important component, according to me, is the mind, which needs to be carefully molded. So developing skill sets is easy, but to develop the mind progressively from one generation of pilot to another, and to another, that is the task that is difficult. And that's what needs to be done. Once we finish with this, we'll then look at the end product of the pilot, and finally the lessons for what I call the non-military world. And I keep saying this because it is all encompassing: bureaucratic, political organizations, and corporate organizations. And I shall now give you a glimpse of this. When we were discussing this, this is what I thought was the essence: molding and training the mind. I must confess, Mother, that I was a rather naughty boy with a mind that fitted from here to there, and all these blokes, who got me in line and made sure I was also part of this molding process. Hats off to them. How did this happen? And how does this happen? So the base is formed in the first 3 + 1 year, that is in NDA plus in the flying training organization. Then you have the operational training. This takes about 2 years. And here is where this very milestone event in a pilot's life takes place, where he has been declared fully operational. That means he can now go to war. He can be part of the team that goes to war. And then he becomes a leader, and he's taught how to be a leader in this thing so that he can lead his men into war. And finally, how he becomes how he commands a unit that has to go to war. Now, this entire process takes between 20 to 22, 24 years. So at the end of this is what I call is the end product of the molded mind of the pilot.
So he starts at about age 17.
Correct.
At the base, when you join NDA, you're about 17, between 16 and 18 years.
That's right. And finishes off by about 40 to 41, because by then he's running out of high speed direction, oxygen, and everything. So he now has to move out from active, because active fighter flying it requires a degree of fitness. Generally, certain lucky individuals who manage to keep themselves very fit continue for more, but active fighter flying finishes off at the command of a squadron.
Around 40-ish.
Around 40 to 41 is when active command of squadron the process is over. Now, I have chosen this particular photograph to transport all of us into the cockpit, because let me start by explaining what should be the mindset of a person who sits in this cockpit and is ready now to go to war, that has been declared fully operational. What all does he require to what all does he require to do? And more than what all is he required to do, how does his mind cater to all these things? So when we flew, Mother, we mainly bothered about these 3 things: aviate, navigate, and communicate. That was the sum total of most civilian flying, and monitoring the systems is a common thing. So you imagine yourself sitting in this cockpit. Incidentally, it's a MiG-21 cockpit. This is a pilot's eye view. You can see land on either side. You can see lovely blue skies with dotted with clouds, and you're traveling along at a speed of 900 kilometers an hour at an altitude of 150 meters. You're part of a formation. You're keeping station, which means you are continuously manipulating the controls to stay in position and station. You are navigating, you are communicating within the formation, and also you are communicating outside the formation with different agencies. And you're monitoring the systems. And now the fun starts, because you have to do a visual scan. That is, you have to visually see designated areas around you. Even today, you have to do this. You have to monitor sensors. It would be an airborne radar. It could be a radar warning receiver. There could be thermal sensors. You could have to deploy chaff and flares. And most importantly, you got a whole heap of weapons to select from to hit targets either in the air or on the ground. Now, if you just told one person, okay, listen, yeah, let's go and do all this, he'll say, listen, Charlie, you're becoming crazy here. Okay, you can't do it. But if you adopt a systematic scan pattern, you can achieve all these things. And it is being done. It's being done day in and day out. So the idea was that this process needs to be formalized, which Indian Air Force did in the various ways that is done. I'm not going to go into the specifics of any issue for obvious reasons. This is what is required at the end when the pilot becomes a fully operational pilot. He needs to do all this.
So you said the Indian Air Force formalizes this pattern. In fact, the Indian Air Force creates this pattern in the mind of the pilot.
In the mind, yes, in the minds of the
pilots. In other words, the scan pattern, aviate, navigate, communicate, and then monitor systems, weapons, doing the visual scan. I mean, this pattern of scanning is called scan pattern, and it's inculcated, trained, established in the mind of the pilot very systematically.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen overnight. And I'll explain, because by the time a person comes to this level, he's already spent at least 3 years in a cockpit, and then has got to this level. And this is only the base level. This is just the beginning. This is the start.
Just to give our partners in learning a flavor for the whole complexity and speed with which the pilot responds in the cockpit. You were mentioning the other day about a bogey or an enemy aircraft at whatever degrees starboard, just above the clouds and closing.
Okay, so let's take this now. When you're doing your visual scan, if you see some thing, let's say on your right, 1 o'clock at about 10, 12 odd kilometers, you will have to analyze whether first what is he, where is he going up, down, etc., and then take the actions that are required to be taken to either he's a threat to you or you are a threat to him. So that's the first assessment that you make, and then you take your actions accordingly. So this entire process happens in a few seconds, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds at most, because the closure speeds are close to 2 seconds a kilometer. So you're covering
closure speed meaning
that means closure between you and the person who's coming head on to you is close to 2 seconds a kilometer. So you've taken 5 seconds to think, he's already 3 kilometers closer. So it's a very rapid situation. Okay, so let's see how we get there. Okay, so it starts with the base, then the operational training, operational leadership, command leadership, and here's where the ball starts rolling. NDA, attributes of the mind, is what I want to draw your attention to just now. I had my squadron commander was Major Katoch, a Gurkha officer, rose to general rank. My divisional officer was a Lieutenant Avtar Singh, a submariner.
At the NDA.
At the NDA. So the starting of this attributes of the mind started from NDA itself, where these individuals and individuals like them for other guys like me, they created and started to create. My instructor in the flying training organization was Flight Lieutenant Augustine John Singh. The individuals like these, and they were all part of the system. It wasn't just these three individuals for me. It was many such individuals or many such other people who were the trainees. So the entire system was created to make sure that the right attributes are embedded deeply into the mind. Now, I would definitely say that how the person imbibes these attributes also makes a bit of a difference. But if you have a system, 70 to 80% of your problems are sorted. So let's quickly look at these things. Aggression. Aggression is a prerequisite of a pilot, of a fighter pilot. He has to be an aggressive individual. There were some blokes, there were some blokes like me who were aggressive in the cockpit also, we were aggressive on the ground also. But the smarter guys, the really good guys, they could change their entire attitude would change once they sat in the cockpit. They were extremely cool on the ground. The moment he got into the air, my brother-in-law was one such person.
I think Air Commodore Surendra Singh Tyagi, whom you talked about, your brother-in-law, I think he's joined us, and we are very, very privileged to have him today.
So he is one.
Welcome, sir.
He is one such individual, who was extremely cool on the ground, but very, very aggressive in the air. So self-reliance, you have to take initiative. Focus is another issue that I'd like to dwell on a little. You have to, at different points in time, change your focus because you want to be situationally aware. But to be situationally aware, you can't be totally focused. So this is something that you train yourself to change your focus. Reliance and survival. Now, as you go up the ladder in this chain of being a fighter pilot, your people start relying on you, and you have to come up to those levels. Discipline is the uncompromising issue that everyone has to confront. We all have to be. Why do we need to be disciplined? We need to be disciplined because unquestioning obedience of command. There is no time to discuss and think. If you are told to go, you go. That's it. So this mind has to be beaten into, literally beaten into becoming a disciplined person. And finally, determination to achieve the mission. Now you have to be determined to achieve the mission. This is what I'm talking of right in the beginning. This is the base. The skill sets come about by the following: basic tactical flying, formation flying. So all these things are done at this level itself. You're told how to do all these things. And then you go and join.
If I can just jump in to the previous slide for a second, Charlie, if you don't mind. So the important point to note here is, the top half of this slide: basic handling, circuit and landings, aerobatics, spin and recovery, basic armament delivery, basic tactical formation, flying. These all have to do with skill development, skills. The last row at the bottom, the series of boxes, is the mindset. And I think that mindset creation is perhaps even more important than the skills, even though skills are critical. The old HR adage is hire for attitude and train for skill. There can be some discussion on that, but basically it's the mindset that needs to be created. A young boy comes into the base, NDA and the ab initio training setup, and his mind is molded with assignments, with orders, with pressure, with unremitting scrutiny, with extreme discipline, extreme fitness, performing mental challenges. All that is done repetitively at every stage. And that's when the molding of the mind of the fighter pilot happens. He becomes aggressive, not outwardly necessarily. He becomes extremely self-reliant because he knows how to handle himself. He will grab initiative where required. He has this laser-like focus on whatever he's entrusted with, and he's never say die attitude, which is resilience, survival. Fighter pilots go through survival training because they are flying beyond enemy lines most of the time. If they're shot down, they need to survive, and it's the duty of the officer to escape if he's captured. So resilience, survival, and then discipline and this uncompromising die before you quit attitude to achieve the mission. All these aspects of the mind are created right from the time this person is 16 or 17 when he gets into the base. And it's on that kind of foundation that all these other skills are being built. Over to you, Charlie.
Great. So, and that's why Madhav, at on every slide you will see on top molding and training the mind, because as you have very rightly said, if I were to break it down, 25% is skill test, 25% is physical fitness, and 50% is in the mind. And this has been the strength, is to train every individual's mind correctly. Because if you've got the mind under control, I'm sure you'll agree we'll have most other things under control too. Okay, now this young lad comes to the fighter squadron and he starts off operational training. There are ground lectures, assessments. Again, goes through see, this is the aeroplane is a weapon. You have to first learn how to wield the weapon before you start jumping around and using the weapon in actual situations. You have to know how to wield the weapon. There are radars, gun sights, etc. You have to get to know all these things, navigation and flying. And I'm just going a little fast here because these are certain issues which I'd like to highlight over here. You see, this ground preparation, attending briefs and debriefs. This briefs and debriefs is a very important portion of this entire process. Why? Because it specifies and highlights activities that the individual has to do. And the debrief is at the end of it all, after the mission is over, has he done it or not? So he starts flying as a wingman in a 2 aircraft formation, then he starts off with 4 aircraft, then he goes into basic air combat, defensive and offensive, and he goes to aircrew, ground, armament work, initially alone, then in formation strikes, and finally he comes to this level where he's declared fully operational day and night. Now, what does this mean? This is a milestone achievement for the individual and the unit both, because now this pilot can go to war. And then he is groomed subsequently into becoming a leader. But this is the base which from where he starts off. Just a word on this documents and records. The fighter pilot and the pilot community is probably the only community, only profession where you have something called a logbook. Every day of what I have flown, dating back to 1975, is all there in something called my logbook. This is a personal logbook. This logbook has a total record of everything. And that's a unit's responsibility to ensure that the record keeping is good, correct, not being allowed to be manipulated, so that the higher echelons in the service can now plan properly. You have to have basis for planning. So your results, etc., everything depends, armament results, everything point towards that. So record keeping becomes an important issue. And now we come to
if I can just come in there for a second, that logbook really represents the knowledge base of the organization. Imagine logbooks of thousands of pilots has this huge amount of knowledge, a database in accessible form. And it's from that knowledge base that new techniques, analysis, historical analysis, pedagogies, training systems, etc., can be created. And very, very few organizations have that kind of wealth of knowledge readily accessible. And I think this is an underrated but crucially important aspect of the Indian Air Force's training pedagogy and training system.
Okay.
Yeah, over to you.
So we now come to the operational leadership training. So after the person becomes, now he starts becoming the person who leads the formations, and conduct the daily flying, conduct the ground training, and now he starts conducting the briefing and debriefings. So, first he was attending the briefings and debriefings, now he starts conducting the briefings and debriefings, and he starts training and grooming the wingmen. So this growth is continuous. There is no respite. You cannot ever sit back and ever say that, yes, now I am in a comfort zone. You're never in a comfort zone.
Tali, if you can explain this whole concept of the wingman. In the previous slide, you said a wingman, 2 AC and then 4 AC, 2 aircraft and 4 aircraft, wingman. So the concept of the wingman, and that's a huge takeaway for the rest of us also.
Okay, so this has progressed over time, different things. Suffice to say that a team consists of at least 4 aeroplanes. And out of those 4 aeroplanes, 2 will be leader, subsection leader, and 2 will be wingmen. So they all have their own specific areas. I can't go too much into detail on this particular issue, but that's what it essentially means, that a section of aeroplanes will be 4 aeroplanes going on.
And the wingman is basically right behind the leader, trying to protect, and he has a defined role.
Yeah, he has a defined role. He has a defined role, which is not as he's been given much lesser responsibilities and duties, because he's still in the process of gaining experience. And as he gains the experience, he will then become what I'm now covering, a leader.
So he's a kind of understudy who's being groomed.
That's right. That's right. And then you have mission accomplishment. I put it in capital because air combat, ground attack missions, exercises, all these are done, and nothing is complete unless you have accomplished your mission. Now, this whole process is all, like I told you in the beginning, tailored and apexing at achieving your wartime goals, which is under the guidance of this particular individual who has risen to become the commanding officer of that unit or of a unit, who is overall responsible for achieving the operational task. So you see how he's grown from just being a normal pilot, becoming operational, then becoming a leader, and now becoming the commanding officer who will lead his unit into battle. So it's a very systematic approach to this whole thing, and that is the takeaway that Madhav, you cannot imagine the detail that you go into. The details are down to the nitty. What time you'll walk to the aeroplane is stipulated. So everything is down in the details. And that's what I think is important. So eventually, you have to motivate by leading from the front. Be responsible for your tenure. So you are responsible for your unit performing, and if you are called upon to perform your wartime tasks, you don't have now time to train. Now you have to deliver. And the difficult part is keeping this chain going in peace, because with this changing environment, changing individuals, changing everything is changing, you still have to retain that cutting edge. Now this is the difficult part. The peacetime preparedness is the difficult part, And it only comes about because there's a system in place.
The cliche is the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. So it's actually the training effort continuously during peacetime.
But I'd like to bracket this. It's a focused training.
Focus training.
You have to focus the training to the role that you have been given.
Right.
So, and you have to, and each individual is different, and he's probably going to change. So at any given point in time, this is probably the most difficult task of the commanding officer of the unit. And that's what he needs to be trained for. His mind needs to be tweaked and turned now and again to make sure that his unit is able to perform. And there is monitoring at every stage. There's monitoring because these things are too important to be left to individuals. Somebody very rightly said, war is too important an event to be left to generals and their contemporaries in the other armed forces. Okay, Madhav, I am turning a little. It's okay. Segment 2. This is the mindset of a fighter pilot and the end product. Now, I can say in all honesty that every word that I have written here is true. And I know that this is why we will be able to perform in war. So let me start with the core values. I'll list them all out and then I'll just cover the few important ones. I call these core values the 3H. I'll cover them a little later. Set the example, team person, OODA loop, SWOT, high motivation. So at the end of this entire process, this is the core value and at sometimes a skill set that has been developed. Now, you will see once I go through them that this is the essence. And this is what needs to be imbibed by these other organizations. So let me get to the next one. This is the first. And all the individuals that I have mentioned right from the beginning till now, each one of them had this one core value, a very deep sense of honesty. Very, very deep. Now, honesty is not just fiscal. It's not just a fiscal that you are honest with your money matters. No. Yes, that is one. But what is more important is in your communication. You must say and do what you think. So what you're thinking must be said and what you're saying must be done. Now, this is the problem that you'll find in a lot of the organizations. We don't say and do what we think. We will manipulate our words and actions, put aside our thinking, which is right, to tailor needs and ends of individuals who don't have the organization at heart, but they are the boss.
In fact, this is a hallmark of great leaders. The complete alignment between what they think, what they say, and what they do. In a lot of people, these three things are all jumbled up, garbled, and there's no alignment. And that's when they have no credibility. But a great leader, always, if you study them carefully, you'll find a great alignment between what they think, what they say, and what they do, because these are three different things.
True.
And keeping them in alignment is, I think, the challenge for a leader. And that's the core value that you talked about.
That's it. So this is the core value. You come to assessment. You see, when you say honesty in assessment, as we grow older and we start analyzing things and we got a lot of data, etc., and we've got to give our boss an opinion of what is our assessment of a situation. We manipulate everything to suit what he wants to hear. And you come away happy, but you've been most dishonest. Now, this is a core value that is imbibed in all of us. That listen, please give us your view, give us your thinking, and make a proper assessment. So it's not just assessing the ACRs. Honestly, that's one small portion of the of this whole thing. It is more related to situational assessments, which are much more valid. Selection of aeroplanes, selection of the bigger issues, selection of what sort of strategies must you employ. You have to make an assessment based on reality and a truthful assessment to come out with the correct solution. Not
actually you're
suits everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, you've hit upon such an important area for leadership. In fact, this is my pet concept of a strategic vacuum, which I talk about in my book also. What the leader believes and what is the reality are two different things, because there's a inbuilt phenomenon that takes place within organizations where people are always telling the leader what they think he wants to hear. And that is not peculiar to any person or organization. This is an organizational phenomenon you will find in virtually every organization. By definition, that's how organizations are. People are always telling the leader what they think he wants to hear. So therefore, what he perceives and what is the reality are two different things. And if he takes decisions in that gap, which I call the strategic vacuum, then those decisions are going to be disastrous a lot of the time. So it's up to the leader to constantly test check and create an environment in which his two ICs, in fact, all his people who report to him, all his team members are always telling him the reality or the truth. So it's up to the leader to create that environment in which people can speak freely and share without reservation what they think is the reality. Yes, over to you, Charlie.
Absolutely. Okay. Hard work. This is, well, I just would like to say, it's not just hours spent at the office. It is your dedication to cover the areas of responsibility honestly and give the right inputs to people. Humility. This is essential in the top level management. Humility in top level leaders, commanders, etc. And this became a core value amongst us. You need, and we also saw that people who were actually good were also very, very humble. They every one of them had a heart. No matter how strict they were, no matter how disciplined they were, when the chips were down and when you went to your boss and you told him, sorry, sir, I've screwed it up, but I need to do this, please help me here. Never has a person faltered, because he himself was humble enough to realize that, yes, mistakes will be made. So you have got to set the examples, you've got to be skill sets come in over here. Team person. Nothing works without a team. There is no individuals. And that's why I said in the beginning, we are all average guys, but we make a damn good team. Now this is the takeover. Okay, I need to spend a minute on this. This is a very important issue called the OODA loop. If you remember, I showed you this right in the beginning, Madhav. And yeah. This is it's a later on management jargon which is common called the OODA loop. Okay, so you take any particular issue, you observe it, you orientate it, you decide, and you act. Now, what this does then is that it trains your mind to start looking at issues like this. And because you're in this high pressure environment, which has got such a lot of tasks to be done, you follow scan patterns and you follow the OODA loop to come to the correct decision and actions. Now, This is what organizations need to do. You need to develop these things so that you can start monitoring larger number of things in a quicker way and update your own mind so that you can take decisive action quickly and in time. But this is what the OODA loop talks of.
What organizations need to do is to first create a scan pattern, help people develop their own scan patterns based on organizational requirements. Broadly, I'll translate that into, for a leader or a divisional head or a regional manager, to have a dashboard of the stuff that he's going to keep track of. A dashboard. What are the variables that he's going to monitor? And then teach him a systematic, disciplined way of scanning those parameters in a regular, timely, periodic manner, and teach him to interpret each one of those variables systematically. Today, a lot of the time, managers, because of their own natural inclinations, create their own dashboards. There are some ready-made software tools available which give you dashboards. But the learning from this slide is that organizations need to first create a dashboard for every level of leader and then train those leaders to scan the dashboard in a very systematic way, firstly. And yeah, sorry, go ahead. And secondly, teach them this OODA loop. Means follow these 4 steps. First, you observe, then you orientate, and based on that, you decide what to do, and then you do it, act. That's the loop. Yes, Chavi.
So if it can be, because if it can work in a such a dense mental environment, it can work anywhere. You can't get a mental environment which is more dense than this.
And more high pressure than this.
True. Okay.
Extremely time sensitive. Like you said, the closure distance is like, the closure time is maybe 2 seconds or 3 seconds. And in that time, you have to observe, orientate, decide, and act.
True.
Human beings can do that if they're trained and then they practice it, and they go through these iterations thousands of times. Yeah, over to you.
The similar next thing, which is equally important, is the SWOT cycle. Now you apply the same SWOT cycle here, that is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you'll see that in every such situation and any one of these things, you will first see whether you are working to your strengths, whether you are working to the adversary's weaknesses. Is he an opportunity or is he a threat? So this little whirl in your head is also going around at the same time. So along with the OODA loop, you're also doing this SWOT cycle, which is equally applicable in the thing. And we'll come to these issues, Madhav, when we come to the third segment. We'll talk about it a little more in the third segment. Okay. So I've covered the first 3. High motivation. Now create an environment for meaningful discussion. Now this is very, very important, because this is one of the core values that you have imbibed, is that you are able to create an environment for meaningful discussion, which means that there are 2 phases of a discussion. One is the discussion phase and one is the decision phase. In the discussion phase, every individual is free to express whatever he wants. But once a decision is taken, then everybody aligns his gyros and follows that one decision that it may go against what you thought. So this sort of an environment will enhance efficiency manifold. Unbiased. Foresight and planning. Presently, Madhav, in most of our organizations, that's the non-military organizations. See, the military world is ruled by foresight and planning. You have to have foresight and planning to be in the military. And this is woefully absent in the non-military world. Okay, cool, calm, collected in emergencies. I have this, what I call the 5-second rule. It's a globally recognized 5-second rule, not a Charlie Weir specific. So recognize, confirm, recover. So first you recognize an emergency, you confirm it, and during this period, don't do anything. Just wait and recover. Now, this at times may shrink, and certain emergencies don't conform to this 5-second rule, I know, because they require immediate action. But most of the emergencies and most of the untoward incidents that happen in your in the corporate world, in any other world, in any other sphere, you have a bit of time to quickly grasp the situation, confirm the situation, and then recover the situation. Madhav, I've gone a little beyond.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Just take a look and see if people have questions on what we have discussed thus far. They're welcome. Here's a question, Charlie. Can you please share an example of an OODA loop?
Okay, so let me give you,
and to explain and to decipher OODA loop one more time.
Okay, so let me just take this particular. I'll use this view for. Okay, so and I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that thing of seeing another aeroplane, seeing another target, or seeing another unidentified target. So when you see this target, you will first, obviously, you've observed him. Now you'll quickly orientate. Is he one of mine? Is he not one of mine? If he's not one of mine, what is he? Is he? Can I launch a weapon on him? Yes, I can launch a weapon. Which one? So let's say I choose an air-to-air combat missile. I make my weapon selection. I launch. It's not taken me more than 5 seconds. Similarly, you go to a slightly simpler one. In this AV8 box, if you look at speed, I'm scanning my instruments. I see speed is 940. So I know very soon I'm going to be out of position. Therefore, I come back. I've seen that. I've oriented myself. I've seen, yes, I'm going sliding ahead. Or I decide, what do I need to do? Pull the power back, pull it back. I'm back in position. So this systematic way in addressing any one of these issues becomes the template for you to apply this to any situation. Once you are aware of how to deal with these issues, then they become templates which you can apply anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got questions?
That's about it for the time being. We can go on to the next segment.
Okay. So now this is the essence of our discussion today, Madhav, and I would like to just say here that, I am of the opinion, and I very strongly believe, that we need to contribute positively to improving our situation, whatever the situation is, and wherever the situation is. Just giving blind criticisms, critiques, negativity is not my way of doing things. So I believe that if I'm able to convince my people around me that, yes, if I imbibe some of these lessons that we have spoken of today, my organization is going to become more robust. My organization will have better foresight and planning, and my organization will be able to deliver goods more efficiently and much better, irrespective of what is my organization. So that is the backdrop to this applications to top level management, and the connect between what we've spoken so far and this. So the first issue is accept the necessity to establish a system for training. Acceptance, Madhav, is the biggest hurdle. Half the time we are very happy where we are. We don't want any changes anywhere because we are all in our little comfort zones, and efficiency is not very high. I'll give you an example of I'll give you an example of some of our PSUs, excellent organizations, but why do they flounder? They flounder because we haven't developed systems of training, we haven't developed systems, we don't have a militaristic approach to the problem. Now, militaristic approach is not a bad word. In fact, you'll find most things which have come into corporate worlds have come from the military. The thought processes, leaderships, etc., because the military is operating at the top end of it all. So create a system to suit the needs of your organization. Now, these are things which I would expect, people in state level organizations, in central level, in any organizations, bureaucratic organizations, non-bureaucratic organizations, is you need to create systems to suit your organization so that you have a doctrine, you have a strategy, you have aims, objectives. Now, this is not just management jargon. This is actual things which need to be done, which will improve, so that people in the middle level can start being trained to think like this, and efficiency will improve. And here's the crunch. Indoctrination into the system must start from the top. If you don't have your bosses, if you don't have and especially in the private sector, at least in the private sector, they've begun to realize that, going to better educational institutions more helps in getting the youngsters into the groove of things. But unless you have professionals getting in and sorting these things out for you and putting systems in place and then handing it over to you, things are not going to improve. And that's what I believe, is that be dynamic in trying to force the change. But the CEOs, MDs, directors, whatever you may want to call them, all of them need to start creating these systems. You've got to delegate and monitor, involvement at appropriate levels, and develop a system of. So once you've done these up to the top 4, once you've done the top 4, then you can start doing these bottom 3, because now you have a system. You'll have people trained in the system. So all this happens if you've done the top 4. And then what we spoke of, the SWOT cycles, the OODA loops, the briefings and debriefings, this doctrines, aims, objectives, goals, all these come on at the lower level so that the monitoring processes can be much simpler.
So this is a concept I request you to explain a little further. And I am a great believer in briefing and debriefing. And I always suggest this to every corporate leader at every review. This whole concept of briefing and debriefing, because I think it's a very valuable tool which people can start using from day one. Charlie, briefing and then debriefing.
Yes. So, Madhav, you can have briefings and debriefings, provided you have a structured system first. So you have to go down this ladder somewhat. You may skip an odd step here and there, but sure. You have to have created a system for your organization. You have to have clear-cut goals, objectives, etc. So that once you've done that, now you can call your middle-level guys and tell them and brief them, and subsequently debrief them. But if you don't have the top 4, then just getting briefing and debriefing.
Agreed.
Is not going to be productive.
Understood. Absolutely.
So this is the takeaway from what we've discussed in the first 45 minutes, is that to be able to apply all these principles, you first have to make sure that you've created the right system. You understood what your goals are. You understood what your objectives are. Those objectives have been honestly assessed. Goals have been set, realistic goals have been set. They've been set by people in the organization itself, because then only they'll believe in them. So all these issues become relevant. And then now you have to achieve your aims and objectives like mission accomplishment. You have briefings and debriefings. So you may have a daily briefing at the lower level. You may have a weekly briefing. You may have a monthly briefing at at the top levels, where it's a two-step thing where you review the previous month and set the goals for the next. So we used to do this because that's how you planned your flying. Even in the flight schools, we did this. We said, okay, July is going to be a bad month, so there's no point planning 300 hours. Plan 100, no? So it's this process that you can put in place, provided you got the four in place first. And unfortunately, these issues are not allowed to fructify because of the mindset of the top people. If the top level CEOs, MDs, directors, if they don't believe, and they don't believe for a simple reason, and my analysis is that they're very underconfident. A confident person will say, let's do it. Just let's put a system in place. But because they are underconfident about their own abilities, etc., they haven't come up the rungs of the ladder. Therefore, they are not knowledgeable enough to be able to put systems in place. So these are issues which are, depends on organization to organization. But at the bottom line, you have to make sure that your organizations, follow these, and imbibe these principles.
So,
Madhav, if there is any other area that you'd like to, okay, great. We are on time.
actually, a lot of organizations, virtually every organization, has a huge learning and development, commitment. They call it learning and development. It is properly staffed and budgeted. Uh, every organization does that, and they've done a lot of pioneering work. They have used psychometrics. They have used performance assessments. They have used all kinds of tools, um, AI based tools to analyze performance and then provide inputs to people to improve their performance, etc., etc. But I think the takeaway from here is that this system of creating the mindset through an appropriate pedagogy and then building on that mindset the necessary skills by intensive, time sensitive, um, disciplined, continuous training. It's not that you just pull off somebody and send him for training now and then, or he has to do so many hours of training every year. This is a constant day to day kind of activity. That's the takeaway from here.
True.
And of course, I am a great believer in this system of debriefing. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What is the gap? How can we plug the gap? And how can we improve? What are the ways in which we can go to the next level so that in the next iteration, we eliminate all the mistakes that we made, and to keep going to the next level in each iteration. A lot of that depends on our commitment to record keeping, also logging what went right, logging what went wrong. And in fact, Charlie, there's one interesting question here. A gentleman asked, how is it that we can get into a discipline of honest self assessment? How do we become very honest in our own assessment of ourselves? And this is a very interesting thing. I've seen a lot of performance assessment exercises where people are asked to rate their own performance. And a lot of the time, I see that a person's self-assessment is higher than the boss's assessment of his performance. It's fundamentally very difficult for anybody to say that, look, I am only at this level. So even if he deep down knows he's at this level, there is a natural kind of bias and a need for validation from other people. His own self-esteem is at stake. So even though he knows he's at this level, when he's asked to do a self-assessment, he places himself at this level. And that has something to do with what you said earlier. Fighter pilots don't need validation from other people. They're strong individuals. They're rooted in their own self-belief. They don't need third-party validations. So the key to doing honest self-assessment is to evolve internal strength through your own discipline, through your own personal practices, and become strong and self-contained inside so that you don't need validation from somebody else. That's when you can become very honest with yourself and say, look, it's okay. I'm at this level. Now I'll learn how to go to this level. So building that internal strength is critical for that honest assessment. Sorry. Yes, Charlie, you were going to say something.
No, I agree with you, Madhav. It's in certain spheres, in certain professions, it's much easier because things are very tangible. When you look at let's take the fighter pilot's profession itself. It's pretty straightforward in the sense that you go to the range, moment you delivered it properly, you've done well. You not delivered it properly, you've not done well. Okay, so your self-assessment is there itself. Similarly, you go on for air combat, and everyone wants to fly with you because they are always getting behind you and shooting you down, and you are never able to shoot anybody down. So it's quite clear. So it's pretty straight. It's pretty straightforward. Madhav, an issue that I'd like to highlight, if I can just go back on these ones a little, because it's important. Important because uh, it's this issue of honesty and its effects or the lack of it on organizations. We had a premier aviation organization in the world, a global premier aviation organization, multi-ruble, multi-euro company. In a short span of 5 years, it's been brought to its knees because of a lack of honesty. And I don't understand as to why organizations don't understand this, especially the bigger organizations, that a lack of honesty is the shortest route to ruin. And if you are honest, especially in certain spheres of activity, let's say medicines is one, is one, aviation is another. Then if you're not honest with your productions, if you're not honest with what you're doing, what you're saying, assessments, these guys were giving wrong assessments as a habit. They knew it. And they floundered. They floundered to such a level that today they are on the verge of being a bankrupt company. Now, I can't give a more apt example than this as to why all these issues, all these core values that we have spoken about, why they are so important for us to imbibe. You see the situations of the United States of America. Okay, in the period of November, December, and January 2020 and 2021, the kind of dishonest narratives that were being shoveled down in a country that was admired around the world, it came to the pits. And this one central thing of being honest and honest in honesty in all its manifestations. This is what I think we should try and emulate more. We are a country which has had a wonderful past and present and hopefully future, but how do we make ourselves more honest? Because if you are honest, the rest of the things will fall in place. And it's not just jargon. And unfortunately, these organizations, especially our non-military organizations, because in the military we have realized that you can't be dishonest. We realize it in Kargil, we realize it here, we realize it everywhere. Yeah, that honestly, if you have got to go and do something, you got to go and do something. Yeah. So you can't be dishonest.
And this has to start from the top, and absolutely right from the top. And it was Kautilya who said 2300 years ago, Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. As the king is, so is the subject. So, like you said, personal example, setting the example, the people, whoever they are, the chairperson at the top onwards has to set the example and demonstrate in body, mind, and action the values, exemplifies the values. And that is what cascades down. There's no easy way. There is no easy way.
Can I give you a small personal example?
Sure, please. That'll be invaluable.
I was commanding, when I was commanding the squadron, we were training youngsters and one of the missions was an air combat mission. So in this air combat mission, I was not a leader. I was one of the other members of the formation. And the leader briefed the mission. We went. It was a bad day at the office for me. And one of the youngsters, came and shot me. Gun cameras were there, so he shot his with a gun camera. Okay, so came the debrief, and because I was the commanding officer, the people in the debrief, the leader and the subsection leader, they were a little apprehensive about bringing out this particular thing in a proper manner. So I listened to everybody, and after a while, at the end of it all, I just stood up and said, let me just cover this whole thing. So I covered the whole situation, and I brought out the mistakes that I made, what I shouldn't have done, and how this young buck capitalized on it, and gave him a pat on the back. Now, if I wasn't honest in my views and in sharing at that time in front of everybody, you will never set the stage for honest debriefs and briefs.
That's right.
And honest assessments. But that one incident early on in my life, it set the stage, and everyone realized mistakes can be made. Yes, they shouldn't be made very often, but they can be made. And if you admit to your mistakes, that's it. So, Madhav, I think we are more or less.
Yeah, there's just one interesting comment by Mr. Naresh Kumar, who I think is a former officer of the armed forces. What he's saying in the chat box is, what I observed is that senior officers under whom you serve make their own opinion and invariably do not consult the officers serving under them. I think he says consult. The individual by himself may not be able to judge at times where he is going wrong. So a counseling session will do a lot of good. Any comments on that, Charlie?
Oh, well, we have systems and systems. as far as I remember, I'm also a little hazy on this because I've never been a great proponent of the annual confidential report, either when I was being assessed or when I was assessing it myself, making assessments myself. But I think a one-on-one with the assessing officer and the person assessed is the order of the day, and that is what is followed in most of the armed forces. I'm not. I'm sure it's being followed in the Air Force because that's what we used to do, and that's what was done with us. And there was, it was a bit of an awkward moment all around, but it was done. It was done mostly.
So that's why I believe that at the very highest level, mentoring is required. And mentoring means helping an individual attain his or her potential, attaining their potential. And therefore, mentoring by definition, at least in my practice and my view, is by definition a non-threatening, non-vested interest based commitment to helping somebody achieve their potential. So the comment is very well taken, and there is a need, especially at the highest levels, for mentoring. And people don't need to view mentoring as something that is done for somebody who's not performing well. No, not at all. In fact, in the last session we had with Admiral Arun Prakash, former Chief of the Navy, we talked about this whole concept of a council of mentors for the very highest level of leaders. It's so important, I think, because everyone needs a third party, non-vested interest based view of how to improve. So, yes, maybe we can take some more questions, Charlie, for a couple of minutes.
I'm open.
Yeah, this one question about how such frameworks like the OODA loop and this whole process will work in a civilian kind of environment where people are free to come and go, so to speak, without the iron frame of the discipline that you all have. Any views on that, Charlie?
Yeah, actually, Madhav, to be very honest with you, these two terms, both the SWOT cycle and the OODA loop, are jargon which is taken from management and civilian organization. And I have sort of superimposed it into this and said, yeah, this is exactly what we guys were doing. We were unknowingly at that time, so probably it worked then. But I think they are equally workable. Again, it is how you train and mold the mind of the people in an organization. Now, human beings, what they are, I believe most people are good.
Yeah.
Don't cater to the bad guys. Cater to the good guys. And teach the good guys the right things that you want them to learn.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone may not conform, but you'll have 70, 80%, you'll have something. So having the system is important.
That's right. A system suited to the organization.
To the organization. Made by the organization.
So that the organization sustainably achieves its objectives and targets sustainably, continuously over a long period of time. So that's why you have the system. And that system changes and is modified as and when the objectives are altered, when the environment is altered. So it's a dynamic situation where you're always mapping to what is required. So whatever you're doing at the back end is mapped to what you need as an organization to be sustainable over a period of time.
So Madhav, can I just dip my foot in a bit of hot water?
Sure.
What about my political organizations? What about my bureaucratic organizations? What about these are the places which have got such a lot of responsibility at a very high level.
Yes.
They need to become much more, and this is part of my, I use this as my closing remarks also, because that's what I want to close with, is that if such a methodology is adopted by the bureaucratic, political, and corporate organizations, one would see them become more robust. A. B. You would be able to project a lot better. So you will not be caught by surprise. You will have much and many more options available to you for problem solving. And when they are being done at this high level and where the stakes are so high, having a proper organization in place is extremely important.
Yeah.
And it is so relevant today. And I think it's a lack of these. And that's why I said, let's be positive in our, I don't want to come across as being critical. I want to contribute to positively improving things. And this is my way of saying, let's improve these things. If we imbibe these into all these other non-military organizations.
Absolutely. In fact, that is, those are a couple of questions and comments that I'm seeing here about the applicability of all these concepts in a civilian environment, maybe even in a startup environment, as somebody said. My response is that these are principles that we talked about. The principles, doing a scan pattern, doing the OODA loop. These are principles translated into doable concepts. These are valid everywhere. The principles are valid, universally applicable, but the manner in which they are applied can be modified, altered according to the circumstance of a particular organism. Principles are always valid. That's why they're principles. It's like the Sarnath pillar, which is standing without any change for 2000 years. They are a core. They're a central pillar, which don't neither weather nor corrosion, nothing affects it. They're immutable and unchangeable principles. That's why they are principles. But application can change in different ways. The principle remains the same. We can talk about it ad nauseum actually. And somebody said this the checklist manifesto by Atul Gawande is a good example of how aviation checklists have been adapted for use even in medicine and everything else. Aviation is all about checklisting, right? Even when in the cockpit, before you even switch on, you have a list and you say magnet is on, throttle on. I mean, all those things, some 20 things you have to check off before you even begin to, consider flying.
So I'd add on by saying, Madhav, that this second point here, that create a system to suit the needs of your organizations. It has to be organization specific. You just pick up from here and put there, cut paste is not possible. Therefore, your analysis of what your organization needs is critical.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And yes, debriefs are critical. We don't do enough debriefs in the corporate sector. I agree with a person who said that. And this discipline of debriefing also has to do with creating an environment for meaningful discussion and feedback. So it's connected. But debriefs are a very powerful tool. And I guess with that, we can go on to our next segment, which I think is the poll, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
Yep.
So you will see questions appear on the screen. I would request all the partners in learning to give their responses yes or no when you see the poll. I'll request Rohit to open the poll. So so that we can see where we are. Yes, the poll is now open. Just have to click yes or no. And the first question is, fighter pilots are born, not created. Second, continuous intense training is necessary for sustained results. 3, scan pattern and OODA loop are mere jargon. And 4, primary leadership responsibility is to create a system of training based on organizational strategy and goals. You're awaiting the responses, so we'll give it a minute. Rohit, how are we doing on the poll? Maybe we can close it. Yeah. And so we have interesting results here. Fighter pilots are born, not created. Just about 18% of our participants say yes, but 82% say that fighter pilots are created. So that's the system Group Captain Charlie Weir was talking about. You have the system and the process. Then the chance, if the process and system is robust and designed according to the needs of the organization, yes, you can create fighter pilots or high performance experts in any organization. The second question is, continuous intense training is necessary for sustained results. Charlie, very interesting. 100% say yes, continuous intense training is required.
Thank you, Madhav. I'm glad. It's very apt, very correct.
And the third one is the scan pattern and OODA loop are mere jargon. 82% say no, it's not just jargon, it's something obviously quite useful. But 18% interestingly say this is jargon. And finally, the last question, fourth question, sorry, is primary leadership responsibility is to create a system of training based on organization strategy and goals. 96% say yes. So the message that you were so articulately giving us, Charlie, has gone home very, very effectively. And finally, as a leader, you are not responsible for everything in your organization. And there's 77% who say no. It's actually trick questions, the other way around. As a leader, you are actually responsible for everything in your organization, and 77% people seem to agree with that. So that's the poll. Any comments on that, Charlie, before we
no, Madhav, but
head off?
I must address the small percentage of the people who don't agree with, especially the OODA loops, and it's not just jargon. I believe it's all very apt and very correct. Pays rich dividends, very, very applicable in all organizations.
Yeah, yeah. I must also mention that we do have two very iconic leaders who are attending this. One is Vice Admiral Muralidharan, who's been with us right through, and Mr. Vepa Kamesham, who was former Deputy Governor of Reserve Bank. He says, I strongly endorse the 3H concept as very essential in civilian organizations and corporate world. The leader who takes those risks and comes up with new workable ideas stands very lonely. And he continues, in fact, there are people ready to throw stones and pull him down. Is that what generally happens? Any comments? Yeah. Charlie, any comments? People throw stones to pull down a leader?
I read a very nice quote from the Sadhguru just this morning. So the Sadhguru said that if you throw stones at me, I'll build a house. So,
that's a beautifully positive way of dealing with criticism.
I think the stone things come along with the territory,
But also one question worth pondering is, why did he throw the stone in the first place? Maybe some introspection could be useful. Why did he throw the stone? That might be worth looking at. Kangat Ranjit says, how can lessons learned in armed forces be applied where people have different value systems? Actually, this is very interesting. I don't think there are any differences in the value systems. The value system for a successful organization which can achieve its potential and be sustainably profitable and which has sustainable growth and builds a brand and is regarded as a benchmark for ethical business. That's the kind of business that will stay for quite some time, which will be respected, which will also have higher profit margins. Such a business has a value system that is entirely aligned with the value system of the armed forces. And these are value systems that are universally applicable. What are these? Honesty, truth, growth, strength, commitment, loyalty, sacrifice, service. These are eternal, unshakable values. Anybody who adheres to those values is bound to be highly credible and be very successful over a long period of time. And by success, I don't mean just making money. But that's another story.
Madhav, can I just make a comment here?
Sure, please.
Madhav, in 2 years ago, just before this previous COVID thing started, they had a seminar in Dubai on the improving aviation as a business. And the organizations that were participating in this were, the top level aircraft, airframe and engine manufacturers. And they spoke of having more efficient engines. They spoke of reducing the carbon footprint. They talked of such like things, all of which actually meant more revenue. Okay. None of them spoke of safety, enhancing safety. None of them. Now, look at those organizations today.
Right.
All floundered because at the bottom of their core value system that they devised, honesty did not find a place. Now, if this can happen to, such large organizations who have the wherewithal to do all the research to come out with the right solutions, if they can go and, muff it up in such a big way, then you'll realize that actually, if you just stick to the basics,
Right.
Organizations will thrive and survive when you look at it long term. If you are in for
Right.
short-term games, 2 months, 3 months, like the stock market, then then we are not. That's not part of this discussion. That's not part
Yeah.
of this discussion.
Sure. Well said. Thank you. Over to you, Charlie.
Okay, Madhav, I'll just close the poll.
Yes. Rohit, can we close the poll? And yeah. Well, I think we are on to your closing remarks.
Yes. So, Madhav, for some reason, this thing has stopped listening to me. Okay. Madhav, first of all, thank you very, very much. I must thank the wonderful audience that Madhav told me is attending this, and a very big jai hind to all my senior officers who are also listening to all this. I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my views with you and hand you over for your summary remarks. Thank you, Madhav.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. I'll be very brief in my summary. The biggest takeaway is that an awesome warrior like a fighter pilot was not created by waving a magic wand and saying abracadabra, let there be an awesome warrior. A fighter pilot was created by a robust, rigorous system of mental development first as a foundation, on which the skyscraper of incredible skills was built. And this entire skyscraper rests on the foundation of the mindset, which in turn rests on the unshakable concrete, cast in stone, perennial block of values of honesty, integrity, loyalty, and all the things that are good and great. So a fighter pilot who is aggressive, who doesn't seek validation from outside, who's very strong inside, who has initiative, who has focus, who's highly skilled, whose reaction time can be counted in milliseconds, who can take decisive actions, who's absolutely determined to achieve his mission and his targets, is created by a system that is so designed. And so that is the biggest lesson for us to learn, whether we head large organizations or we have launched a startup, or indeed we are bringing up children. Thank you so much, Group Captain Charlie Weir, for sharing your fabulous experience with us. And I think all of us were enthralled with every little thing that you shared with us. And to me personally, it was such an enriching, such a wonderful experience to revisit some of the good times that we had, and also to understand the innards of flying. Thank you so very much. Thank you so
Madhav.
much.
Thank you, Madhav. And I can't resist this. I can't resist this. I just pulled this one back because
I think you should explain that, Charlie.
Yeah, because here you see this guy. And that's the essence, to touch the sky with glory.
And mind you, that was a MiG-21 flying at over 1,000 kilometers an hour at an altitude of just 250 feet. Just imagine flying at 1,000 kilometers an hour at 250 feet. Think of the reaction time and skill level. That's what you can become if you commit to the kind of robust development program that Group Captain Charlie Weir talked about. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I look forward to seeing you in the next session. And thank you, Charlie, for your wonderful, wonderful efforts and sharing so generously of your experience and ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.